Thanks again for everyone coming out. We have a great panel, great discussion topics coming on. So as they sit closest to me, this is Frank Bistrian. He's CEO of WorkWellWin, new co-working space in Austin, New York, Connecticut, LA, and about 85 other places on tap. We have Andy Tryba, CEO of about 5 companies, including RideAustin. If you have a rideshare app in your phone, it should be RideAustin. You're in Austin.
I agree.
Support it.
Totally
it's great. It's local. He's also CEO of Crossover. We have Michelle Davey. She is CEO of Enzyme Health, wonderful little startup here in town. Also worked with Medici before that and Favor. And then we have Ricardo Galan. Said that correctly?
Correct.
Who is Director of Workforce Performance for USAA. Awesome. Now that I've introduced them, I'm going to let them introduce themselves, give a little bit more flavor into what they do. We'll start with Frank. But after you introduce yourself and kind of give a little flavor of what your background is, I'd like to start with the past, right? We're talking about the future of work, but I want to know what each of your first job was and kind of how that informed where you are today. So you can't predict the future without the past, so I'd like to get a little bit of everyone's background. So a little bit more about what you're doing and then your first job.
All right. Thanks everybody for coming out. Can you hear me? There you go. How's that? All right. So what we're doing is we've launched a collaborative workspace company called WorkWellWin that is focused on more professional sort of version of what's out there, and with a strong overlay of wellness that's woven into your entire day, from the air you breathe to the water you drink to the light you feel to the opportunities for meditation, yoga, and other fitness throughout the day with healthy snacks. So it's not just a hour after the day, it's what you do all day. And it'll become part of the fabric of your day. And so we're very, very excited to have one of our flagship locations opening here in Austin, 100,000 feet on the east side, and should be open around September. And we just can't wait to see all of you out there. First job. My dad was a general contractor on Long Island in East Hampton out on the beach, and he used to have me picking up garbage on job sites. Basically, it was my first job when I was about 12.
All right, hey guys. Hopefully South by is treating you guys well. So my name is Andy Tryba. I run a few companies here. So I run a company called Crossover, which is an online talent marketplace. We're in about 100. Thank you for the shout out. I appreciate that. 108 countries or so, and we believe that the best talent is all over the world, and you can find yourself to any given location or any given office, then you're constraining your talents, so you should find people everywhere. Another one is a company called Engine Yard, and it's an engineering company working with DevOps in AWS. Another one is DNN, which is a content management company. The one that you guys are probably most familiar with is a company here in town called RideAustin, which is a nonprofit rideshare version of Uber and Lyft, which, by the way, is still going. Keep using it, folks. Keep using it. And then I just started a new private equity firm called Think3, which is basically intended to give startup founders another shot on goal, where a lot of founders, particularly in places like Austin, get stuck in their companies where it might be growing all right, but there's no B round or C round. So we buy those companies and then give them about $500,000 in cash to go start their next one. So that's me. Oh, first job, thank you. Yeah, so my first job was a shitty job. Actually, I might offend somebody in here. So I was 15 and a half, and I was my dad was like, "Hey, you're gonna get your license soon." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm so excited." They're like, "Oh," he was like, "Hey, do you have enough money to buy your first insurance payment?" I'm like, "What are you talking about, Dad? I didn't know that I needed that." He's like, "You need to go get a job." So literally, I ran out and I walked down the street because, of course, I didn't have my license yet. And Wendy's was actually opening up a new facility. So literally, I was like, "All right, well, how hard can this be?" So I rolled in there. Worked for 2 weeks, and I think I was the shittiest Wendy employee of all time. Got my one paycheck. It was good enough for the first half of my insurance payment, and then I quit on the spot, and then call it a day from there.
Nice, nice.
I'm Michelle, CEO and co-founder of Enzyme Health. We are connecting doctors to lucrative and freelance jobs in the new gig economy of healthcare. So I've been around Austin for about 5 years, helping a number of different companies scale their hiring initiatives, such as Favor, Sparefoot, Digital Pharmacist, and Warby Parker. First job was equally as shitty. So much like Frank, my family owns a plumbing company. So when I was 14, my first job was sweeping the warehouse. I hate sweeping to this day.
Hi, I'm Ricardo Galan. I'm actually the director for Workforce Analytics at USAA, sort of local in San Antonio. So we're actually spinning this off. This is kind of a new area for USAA, moving away from just doing people reports and actually understanding what's happening in the marketplace, what's happening in our workforce, how do we change the way we create employee experiences so we actually become more productive and people are happier and therefore our membership is happy with what we provide them. First job was actually building websites in college for a research group.
A much better job than mine
Yeah,
was.
that was the best job
And
I've
mine.
ever
Best job
done.
for 5 hours.
By far.
By far.
You,
I worked on a farm, by the way, baling hay. So
Nice.
equally, I think we're on this
Nice.
side, and
Same
Ricardo's
page,
just
same
over
page.
there.
A lot of stuff happens on farms.
Yeah, exactly. Really shitty. So today's topic, right, is the future of work. It's the Workspace Revolution. It's the second annual for Team Austin, right? And when we think about this, we're thinking about, there's a lot of different topics we can go with, right? So some of the ones we'll talk about today, especially given the panelists we have, is the rise of the remote worker, the kind of the advent of co-working spaces and how they've proliferated around the US. I mean, I think in Austin alone, we have around 70 now. But also culture. And what we just got with Ricardo, kind of talking about what he does at USAA. How do we make our employees happier, right? So I told Michelle that I would only ask her the easy questions, so I'm going to start with the hardest question for her. Michelle, when you were with Favor, you were head of, I guess it was talent and culture, right? And when we think of Favor, we think of this is a tech company, right? And so you have all these technologies today, AI, machine learning, things like that. But do those things really play into when you're thinking about the culture of a place? Are you using those technologies a lot, or is it something more old-fashioned?
Yeah, I think the one thing about culture that a lot of companies get wrong is that they try to determine what it is before their employees can. I think one thing that Favor did really well is we gave our employees the power and the space to define our culture. We gave them a little bit of executive buy-in and kind of set them for a project, but we really let them run with what they wanted to do. So if the culture committee that we put together wanted to use technology to formulate their next project, we let them do that. If they wanted it to be really old school and we were cutting out shapes of bow ties and signing our names, we did that as well. So I think with culture and building the culture, for companies, you have to really look to your employees before you look at the executive team and really give them the freedom to create the culture that they want to be in.
Yeah, can I follow up question?
Yeah,
to it?
definitely.
So what I love is actually the culture of your, folks, your runners, right? And you guys have, I think, like 50,000 runners and things like that. And it's so much harder to build a culture when people are contractors, when they're part-time, maybe they're working a couple hours a week. I guess I'd love to, hear more about like how does that grow?
Yeah, that's a great question. We tried to create a community in every city that we were in. So for Austin, for instance, there's a Facebook group called the Austin Runners. You're talking 15,000 people strong, talking about different ideas and ways that they're successful in their everyday running situations. That really creates a sense of culture. I think going beyond that, Favor's done a lot of really cool things about creating clubhouses within these cities. So Austin, for instance, has a clubhouse on the east side where runners can come and hang out when anytime they want. They don't even have to be working a shift or be on. Dallas, they just opened their new run house. And it enables them to, take a break, but also be a part of the community. And they do a lot of webinars about top runners and really reward the runners that are taking a stance to improve themselves and improve the company.
Ricardo, got a follow-up for you on the similar topic. So when we talk about culture or purpose in the workspace, and you said making people happy, these are very qualitative things, right? How can we quantitatively measure that? In your role, how do you know that you're, other than, a Jerry Maguire moment where someone's just, I'm taking the fish and leaving. How do you know ahead of time? How do you, kind of foreclose those events from happening?
That's a great question. So the first thing that we actually have we're about to be, I think, 95, 96 years old company, is that from the beginning we have an incredibly strong mission, and that's the thing that's a key part of our culture. Everyone does the right thing because of, hello? Yeah. Because of our mission to actually serve the military community. Apart from that, we are actually completely redoing the way that we are actually measuring employee experiences. No longer are we going to actually just survey people once a year and then forget about it and sort of act like we do something. We're actually completely revamping that into measuring how satisfied are they with the different aspects of culture, the aspects of the workspace and how they work and work flexibility, and actually the technology that they have to use and the information and the data that they have available to actually do their jobs. And we're actually going to do it monthly. We're actually going to constantly be pulsing the employee base, so we actually constantly know what's happening and can actually act upon it very quickly.
Are there certain technologies you're using to kind of facilitate that, that are like new technologies now, or is this just kind of old school, like email and just...
No, we're actually implementing a brand new survey platform that will allow us to do this, but we're also developing in-house all the analytics and reporting using things like Tableau to actually become more engaging. So it's not longer a PowerPoint that we produce. There's going to be actually a Tableau report that actually changes constantly. So you actually, as a manager, you're actually engaged with the process.
Andy,
Yes.
I think, long pause. When you answered a few questions early on, I think you employ the most people, right? I think you had several hundred people that you manage on a day-to-day. With this, with the new generation coming up, are you seeing any trends about, we're talking about culture and purpose. Are there any trends you're seeing? Are the employees you have now, are they asking for different things? Like, what are you doing when you're managing such a large number of people to kind of implement that purpose and happiness, especially when everyone's remote, right?
Yeah, so we run all of our companies remote, so all of them. I think that people think about culture the wrong way. People like to think about culture as, hey, I've got a ping pong table and I've got some free beer and hey, that's totally my culture. When in reality, culture is all about, having this shared mission that you're going after a really hard problem, and you got a bunch of smart people that go and conquer that problem. And that everyone's dedicated to go and make that happen. And I find that, there are great people everywhere. And if you confine yourself to just one given zip code, I use the sports analogy, right? Where, if we were going to put together a football team here in Austin, right, it'd be fine. It's the 11th largest city in the United States, so it'd be a pretty decent team. If we expand our denominator to all of Texas, odds are pretty good that the Texas team is going to beat the Austin team. And then if we were to expand our denominator again to all the United States, though controversial perhaps in this room, that team would probably beat the Texas team, and certainly going to beat the Austin team. So as you expand your denominator, you get better and better people, and therefore you get awesome people to then go conquer that same mission together. And that's actually, going to battle together is actually how you build culture. And I find that that transcends any generation, right? Where there's a lot of talk about the millennial generation versus Gen Y, Gen X, whatever. And I find that people just want to work on cool shit that is really hard to go solve, and everyone feels like they're dedicated to go do that. And I find that it's an advantage to be able to run that from a multi-location perspective to get the best people to go solve that, and that then drives up the dedication, then drives up the culture. So I find that it ends up being an advantage in that sense.
Yeah, and that's really interesting. I think it ties into co-work too, Frank, right? So you're running a remote team and saying that culture isn't the ping pong and the beer, but you're running an organization that's going to have different companies. Like you're running an organization with 1,000 different companies with different employees and different purposes. How do you build in that purpose and culture within a space?
I think we look at it as everybody wants to feel better about themselves and feel better physically, mentally, emotionally about what they're doing. And when you feel better, you're more productive. So we're trying to provide a healthier place for people to work. A lot of this started, I worked for JP Morgan and a few other companies in New York City for a long time, taking the train back to Connecticut every night. And you look at the people around you, and everybody looked like they just got through a fight with Mike Tyson. At the end of the day, they're all like this, train drooling on themselves and whatever. And it's just, there's got to be a better way. So when we started this, we said that the health and the wellness part of it has got to be the centerpiece, and it's got to be more important than anything else. And let's try and develop a better way for people to work. Not so much co-working, but well-working. So everything from the time you come in to the time you leave is you have the opportunity to have a better experience physically, mentally, and I think when people are in that better state of mind and feel better about what they're doing, that's where the culture will come in. And I don't think you need a ping pong table or a beer tap. You just, in our opinion, what we're going to do is we're going to make people feel better about themselves all day long, and hopefully that provides the results I think it will.
This next question is kind of gonna build on what we just talked about, Frank, and kind of bring all three of you in, because with so many different co-working spaces out there, and I truly believe that the wellness aspect you're taking is this great differentiator. But how do you promote that differentiation when there's so many out there? And then are you going after bigger businesses? And that ties into this. Would you all put your employees in a co-working space? Would USAA put its employees in co-working space?
Yeah, so I hope they will, because there
Trying to help
are,
you out right here now.
Yeah, thanks. There are Fortune 500 companies as well as startups are all our target audience, and we really see ourselves as a solution for the satellite offices of the large corporations as well as the startups. And I have a long background in global real estate at JP Morgan, and so I have an insight onto what works for those companies and what doesn't. As for the amount of co-working companies, I don't even know how many there are. Somebody who works, Connor, who works in our office back in Greenwich, told me there were over 5,000 co-working companies. What we have to do, and I hope it's for not much longer a differentiator of the wellness. I hope everybody starts doing it. It's really important to me that people work healthier. So I hope everybody adapts it, and I hope it's not a differentiator much longer. But whether it is or it's not, we just have to offer a product that people are happy with and people want to come back to every day. And if we do that, I think all the rest will take care of itself.
Yeah, so I'm a huge believer in co-working as a whole. So I think people get the whole remote work thing wrong also. They think like, oh, remote work, I get to work from home, it's awesome. And that's totally true, but I believe more in like the hybrid cloud model, right? Where sometimes it makes sense to be working from home. Sometimes it makes sense to get people together in a co-working spot and brainstorm and whatever else it may be. Sometimes it makes sense to go to a coffee shop, right? So you want people to be productive wherever they feel like they could be the most productive. And human beings are social animals at the end of the day, so like it totally makes sense to get together. And I think co-working spots is a great opportunity for people to change it up and meet different people and get different ideas. And so therefore, I'm super bullish on the future of co-working around the world. And I'm super excited to see more and more differentiated solutions kind of come out there.
Yeah, I think I'll mimic Andy there. I'm all about where people want to work and they're most productive and where they're most happy. So I actually don't tell my employees or anybody where to work. Wherever they feel like they can be the most productive is where I want them. I personally have worked in co-working spaces and it didn't work for me. So being in a co-working probably wouldn't be it, just because I'm easily distracted. But if
Squirrel.
if somebody wants to work there, absolutely.
So for us, it's a little bit different. We're actually quite regulated, and we have to have tons of security around our customer information. So we would not be in a space like that, but we're actually looking at similar spaces within our own spaces and how we actually have flexible spaces. And for example, my actual team and my bigger team is actually piloting this new type of workspace at USAA. So no longer are there cubes. They're actually individual desks that you can actually roll anywhere on the floor. No one gets an assigned desk. Everyone gets to be in a separate space every time. You can actually huddle up desks together so you can actually collaborate, or you can actually sit. Actually, we even have these things called dentist chairs. So if you want to like work while you're looking up, we have those. So it's actually really interesting, and it actually has completely changed the way that we work in our team. And because we need it to be more collaborative, not just within my team, but the other 4 or 5 teams are within our department need it to be more collaborative, and that has completely changed. We've been there, I believe, like a month and a half, and it's just outstanding, the difference.
Go on, Frank.
Yeah, so we're going to win Ricardo over eventually. I already started upstairs, and we'll get him into WorkWellWin soon. But I think it's the way forward, not just for co-working and well-working. I think it's the way forward for medical offices. We're looking to do some of that in Austin. I think it's definitely the way forward for retail moving forward. Have a collaborative retail space where when the space is open, I mean, they do it in some department stores, but a real version of that where you have 5 or 6 stores within one space, shared spaces, shared equipment, and for food service, the food halls are blowing up everywhere. I mean, they're just, it's the whole economics of space and the usage and shared usage of amenities is the way forward. Just the real estate costs are too much of a drag on
Can you give
budgets.
me a co-working spot that kind of looks like that?
Johnny's plane, yeah, we'll get you in that. That's Johnny Kelly's plane, by the way.
So I'm going to add, so from my experience, actually I have a couple of employees that are actually work remote all the time. And the interesting part that they actually see is that they miss working at the office, because they miss that talking in the, like to your buddy next to you, or talking to someone on the hallway. So it's interesting. That's going to be the challenges for like everyone as we move to giving flexibility to people to work wherever they want. How do we actually use technology to actually enhance that experience so everyone feels connected and engaged with everyone else in those organizations?
I think you just asked Andy a question.
Well, no, I think that you're actually trying to do one of the hardest things is that, it's easier to either be 100% remote or 0 remote. when you're stuck in that in-between spot, you have super high bandwidth connections between people that are in the office that have to make an extra effort to go talk to that guy that is, at that pod, wherever the hell he may be, working from home, right? And the advantage, I think, on the full other end is that when you don't have that centralized pod, it forces everyone to go use Zoom, use Skype, use Google Hangouts, because that's the way that, use Slack, whatever else it may be, because that's the way that everyone has to communicate. So you then end up creating these high bandwidth connections between all of the nodes, as opposed to a bunch of nodes here, and then a low bandwidth connection to these other ones. So I find that transition is incredibly difficult, but I do also find, though, that I see my staffs more now than I ever did when I had physical offices. So I was at Intel for 14 years. I was in the White House for the year. And in both of those places, my staff was next to me, right? But I was always gone. They were always gone. And everyone's always calling in on these shitty telephone connections and whatever. You never saw each other, right? Versus now we have staff meetings and people are in 10 different countries, but you click a button and you could see everyone. And I find that being able to see people in HD matters a lot. Because when people are on a conference call, and I know everyone in here has done it, right? You're on a conference call, you're not paying attention, you're banging away at email or doing whatever the hell you want to do. But when you're on video, you can't jack around anymore because you can see someone actually banging away on their email. So you get engaged, and you can see both the verbal and the nonverbal communication at that point, and that matters a lot. So I'm a huge believer in high-def video, high-def audio in the right configurations. It has to be you are sitting with the people, and it matters a ton. But you're going through a tough transition to have pods out there.
So I want to continue on this topic a little bit more because I find it really interesting. We have the rise of remote work where we're kind of becoming disparate. But we're also talking about how important spaces are, like co-working spaces. And I can see how those tie together where, Andy, half of your crew could be at one of Frank's co-working spaces somewhere else, and some are in a different city and kind of collaborate. But I always think back to Bell Labs and Apple, right? These behemoths that created amazing technologies, and they always created their workspaces to try to create these random occurrences, right? How do we continue those random occurrences in an economy, in a business world where we are just using Zoom? I get it, I've done it myself, but what do you think the next level is to recreate that in a kind of virtual world? And all of you can answer this. I know, Michelle, you have a ton of, you're remote, you've had remote people. Ricardo, you're working with remote people. Frank, half of your employees, or not employees, but your members will be in this remote world.
And employees. Our headquarters is spread from Austin to LA to Boston to New York. So, I think the Skypes and the telepresence are great, and they've come. It's so much better than it was 5 years ago, and you can actually feel like you're actually interacting with somebody in real life, which is super important, and you just can't replicate that on a phone call. So I think you really need to, the connection, the human connection is so important to the whole making the remote work actually function properly.
Yeah, so personally, we use Slack. I'm a huge fan of Slack. We have multiple channels that go outside of just work. For instance, one of our developers, I've actually never said anything regarding work to him. I just send him dog pictures, and he sends me dog pictures back. So we connect on a level that's not just work. We're enjoying things together. That's not just what we're working on day to day. And those channels enable multiple people to join them. Favor was one of the companies that we use Slack quite a bit, and there was a board gaming Slack channel that was hot. People were always talking about the newest board game and when to get together. And I think channels like that and technology like that allows you to connect on a deeper level is really important to continue that culture while you're separate.
Yeah, so I believe that people have massively screwed up the whole serendipitous encounter stuff. And when you go back to actually the history of the open spaces movement, it was all basically mirrored off of the MIT spaces that were there. And they're like, oh, look at when you get people from different disciplines, you can get all this amazing creativity and like, oh, see, they could all interact together. But they didn't actually study how the MIT setup was done. And there's this great book called Deep Work by a professor by the name of Cal Newport, which you guys should all read. And so he goes through that whole thing, and he's basically like, hey, guys, everyone had their own offices where they can get real good deep work done. And then there was a hallway where they were all converged, and then they would have these serendipitous encounters. It wasn't that everyone was sitting in the hallway, because unfortunately you don't get real work done then at that point. And there's another great study by a professor in California, the UC system, that talks about how the typical information worker gets interrupted between every 3 and 11 minutes every day, right? And literally all day you're in this massive interrupt cycle, right? And sometimes that interrupt cycle is actually you, believe it or not, doing a Alt-Tab over to your mail, and you just check it real quick and you go back. But what Cal Newport basically talks about is that you need these long stretches of uninterrupted time to get to a higher cognitive answer. And if you're interrupted every 3 minutes, you never get there. And it actually takes you about 25 minutes to get back to even where you were to get going. And you have something it's called cognitive residue, where you Alt-Tab over to the email, you glance through your email, you come back, but in reality, your brain is still kind of hanging out over there. And you're like, should I respond to that email? What did that person mean, right? And then you haven't even really thought about like what you're getting back. So you have to have these spaces where you can go and, put the headset on, whatever it may be, and hole away and get your real work done. And then when you want to, and it makes sense to go collaborate, you go collaborate. But unfortunately, you see a lot of these folks going to full open office spaces, and it's just massive interrupt factory. And like it's literally the exact opposite of what MIT did to actually create those serendipitous encounters.
That's super interesting, and it makes a ton of sense. On the side, I'm Vela Wood, law firm, but on the side, I run this company called GlobeKick. We've kind of talked about it before. And we started out as one of these remote work, take people 1 month at a time. We'll take you to different cities around the world. And that model doesn't work, right? I mean, remote year might have been first mover, and I think they're just hemorrhaging cash right now because the model doesn't work, and it's an interrupt factory, and no one's getting good work done when you're working out of a hostel, essentially, right? So it makes sense. Like the collaboration, it needs to be much more intentional, right? So that's a wonderful input right there. Ricardo, do you have any comments on this topic as well?
Yeah, I think, to go with that same theme as, like, all these different spaces are not for everyone. So, we actually are looking at, I like that whole area to go focus. We have those now too in that new space where you can actually like close the door and like no one bothers you. We have like focus pods, but we're also looking at it in a very analytical way, how we actually deploy these new spaces. Only for teams that are highly technical and highly collaborative are they gonna get spaces like this. Other people, like accountants, they're gonna get cubes still. Same with like call center people. They don't need a collaborative
He loves
space.
all you accountants in here, though. You didn't mean to disrespect accountants, though.
Sorry.
Kidding.
Sorry. But you know what I mean. They don't have to. They're not creating new things. They're just.
I'm totally kidding.
So it depends on the job classes and the type of work that you're doing. And this goes back to, I think, one of the conversations we have before this, that we're not even looking at generational differences. So it's not the millennials. It's actually the job categories. It's the designers and the coders and the data and analytics people that actually behave in a certain way that need this collaborative spaces and the flexibility and the work from home and the remote work. Those are the ones that we're seeing, and it's not generational at all.
Wonderful. I want to shift gears a little bit and ask a more Austin-centric question, although I think it can apply to San Antonio as well, so we're not going to leave you out, Ricardo. Everyone in this room, if you've lived in Austin longer than 9 months, sees that the city is constantly transitioning, right? We have behemoth tech companies moving in all the time, and there seems to be maybe a David and Goliath problem that's starting to occur, right? With Apple coming to town, with Facebook. I'm wondering how Michelle is a smaller tech startup. I'm wondering how do you compete with that, and like what are some of the tools you've used to find your talent with all of these kind of bigger players coming in, maybe paying more per person and kind of driving up the prices and such? Kind of what are you seeing? Are you seeing the effects of this kind of David and Goliath?
Yeah, so that's hard. I think that's a two-part answer for me. For big companies like Facebook and Apple and Google coming to Austin, I actually personally really enjoy it. I think from a recruiting perspective, if you look at the lifetime of an employee there, it's about less than 2 years. So that means every 2 years, kind of the startups are getting a refresh of talent that's coming into the market. But, you know, during that time, because we're remote, we look outside of Austin if we can't find the skill set or the level that we need. And really expanding that geography has worked well for us.
Another Austin question for you guys, and feel free to anyone to answer this one. I was at an event the other day, and one of the speakers made a similar comment, and so I don't know who they're referencing, but they said a very famous VC in Silicon Valley said, "I will never invest in an Austin-based company." And the guy asked him why, and he said, because when I go to Austin and I go into an office, the doors, you know, by 8 o'clock, it's empty, right? And so what are your thoughts on that? Is that something that we need to, quote unquote, work harder like the coast? Or is that something that we should be proud of and that you would be proud of and kind of use as a recruiting tool?
So I think it's bullshit, is what I think. In what world would you not want to invest in freaking kick-ass people with kick-ass ideas, right? So if they don't want to invest, that's cool. I'm happy to buy those companies. But no, like, I mean, I don't believe that the measure of wealth of a company is how many hours that people actually are there, right? I believe that creative ideas come from everywhere. And I don't believe that. I actually believe it's counterproductive to freaking sit at your desk for 16 hours a day because you're just banging away and you're on one single train of thought. So I think it's great. Like, go and get great ideas everywhere. Go run Town Lake, which I guess dates me, or Ladybird Lake, or whatever it's called now. You know, so I believe that the talent here is awesome. But I do, you know, when you actually do look at the raw numbers, the investment dollars is significantly less here in Austin than a lot of other places. But I believe that that's going to continue to change. I think that you see a lot of the big money actually coming into town. You see a lot of private equity coming in from the coast, whether you like the new tax policies or not. You see a lot of money coming in from the coast and what have you. And so I think that's going to continue to grow. And then you look at, you know, again, like you mentioned, a lot of the additional talent that comes in through a lot of these tech companies, they go and spawn off all of these other great companies. You know, you look at you know, what Trilogy did in the 90s, and all of the companies that have been spawned off of that is a great example of the same deal with all of the Google and Facebook and, fingers crossed, Amazon getting here. Like, you bring a lot of great people, and great people create great things, and I think that's how cities grow.
Yeah, and I don't think it matters what time your doors are open or they close. Nobody's getting away from anything anymore with the smartphones. You're connected 24/7. You shouldn't be in the office all the time. You should get out, go have a walk, run a lap, do something, take a yoga class, meditate, whatever you need to do to keep yourself fresh, because you're being called on 24/7 to respond. It just doesn't stop. And you know, someone who doesn't like that the doors are closed at 8 o'clock is just somebody we probably don't want in Austin anyway.
Go to Japan. Japan's like the opposite, right? Where like people are like dying at their desk literally because they're working so long. And like, would you rather invest in Austin company or those companies? So I'm half Japanese, so I can kind of diss on the Japanese a little bit. But go ahead.
Do you have any comments, Ricardo? You good? Do you want to comment on that as well? Or?
No, I mean, I completely agree. That's part of our culture, that you actually have to have life balance. We don't even call it work-life balance. It's actually, your life has to be balanced, and it's not all about work. It's about your relationships outside of work too. So, and what you bring from those ideas that you bring from those other relationships. So.
Well, we're getting down to the last 15 minutes, so I want to open it up for Q&A. So if anyone has questions, let's see. I don't know if this cord goes long enough. Nick, do we have a project? All right.
Hi, Michelle. Michelle, you were earlier talking about how one of the companies you worked at, culture was really driven by the employees up. I just would like to kind of hear from you, as well as from anyone else on the panel, the level of importance of authenticity to culture. Just in terms of, myself as a millennial, I know that something that's very culturally important for us is authenticity. So if we could just discuss that a little bit, that would be great.
Yeah, great question. I think authenticity is probably one of the most important things that you can do when building a culture. And the way that we accomplished that was taking multiple people from different teams, different levels, different experience, and different career paths into a room and essentially letting them work on a project that they came up with. So it wasn't just coming from the sales team or individuals who had been there for over 2 years. It was a number of different people coming together and really building something authentic to them. At Favor, there's core values that were developed by each department and voted on, and really then refined by a core values team. Yeah, absolutely. I think authenticity plus the entrepreneur spirit, because you really have to give employees the power to grow their career and grow the company they want to work in. If you dictate that from the top down, you could get it wrong and miss. And when you do that, it's detrimental to your talent and their career path as well.
Yeah, and I think if you try and force the culture, that's what you wind up with, just forced culture. It's not real to what the people in your organization are about. And it's just trying to make them fit into a box that they might not fit into.
All right, so I'm gonna debate you guys just a little bit. So I do believe actually there's a big part of it is tops down, in that if the core mission of the company isn't aligned to the leadership and how they're actually driving and making the decisions, then when it gets further down into the organization, then they're just making random decisions that aren't aligned to the actual culture. So, yeah, so like RideAustin is a good example, right? So it's a tiny little team that actually runs the dev and everything of RideAustin. We've got 20 people or whatever it is. We've got 5,000 drivers, right? And it's the drivers that actually drive the culture, believe it or not, of RideAustin. And then not only is that because there's 5,000 of them, but they're actually the ones interacting with all the people. Right? I mean, you're cruising around in the car, you're with the person for 5 to 10 minutes, whatever it may be. And if that driver doesn't also believe in the mission statement of what we're working on and the fact that we've been able to donate $300,000 to local charities and things like that, then the whole thing breaks down. So you have to be aligned at the top in how you drive it, and that actually then gets permeated all the way throughout the organization. So I don't know that the drivers on their own would have that same direction, right? So I think that you have to have the top-down alignment and the bottom-up to make it reality.
So my question is for Andy. Right now, I know we spoke a lot about like having full-time employees, but you work with mainly contractors and remote employees. So I really wanted to know, how do you get to manage those people? Because one of the biggest problems right now is outsourcing. It's like people are really scared of outsourcing work because they're like, I don't want to work with anybody that doesn't really care about what I'm doing, right? So how do you make sure like people that you're working with really care about the job that they're working on, and how do you manage those projects?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think that this debate within the U.S. and even elsewhere a lot of times permeates in whether or not you're an employee or even a contractor, right? And I believe that that's the wrong discussion, in that, all that is taxes, right? Where you're like, okay, if you're a 1099 instead of a W-2, does that really matter, right? In that, like, you're either committed to the cause and you believe in that company and you believe in what you guys are doing, or you don't. And like how you're actually treated from a tax perspective, in my mind, is the wrong discussion. But the right discussion is one that you just brought up, which is like, how do you then find people that are indeed share that same mission. And I believe that you can absolutely do that, whether it's, employees or contractors in that case. And in our world, like, again, we rely on, 3,000 contractors from these 108 different countries to go and be a part of that. But we screen them not only for their competency, but then also like whether or not they're culturally aligned to where you want to go and take it. And you bring those people together and you assemble them into your team, and then you go bite fat of that together. So I would worry less about, their not only their tax and what have you, but just simply like, are these people the people that you want to battle with or not? And if the answer is no, that doesn't matter if they're employees or contractors or whatever, like, or outsourcers, like, these aren't the people that you want in your camp. And the way I always judge it, at least for my staff, is like, if I were to go do another startup, like, is this the person that I would take with me or not to go and do that? And if the answer is no, you're like, maybe that's not the right person to have on your squad anyway, right? So that's the way I look at it. Yeah, so the question was is how do you manage them? And I actually treat them just like any other employee, right? So we do, stand-ups with all the developers, whether they're employees or not employees. We have them in the same staff meetings. We treat everyone the same because it doesn't matter in my mind on whether or not, you're an employee or not an employee. You're either on the same boat and you're going to go fight this battle together, or you're not. But you have to treat people the same. I think that is when you start treating people like, okay, you are, you're the outsider, then they're gonna be like, okay, then I'm the outsider, then I'm not committed, right? You gotta pull them in, like they're part of you, right? Like you guys are gonna go make this happen together, or you're not, right? So
Yeah, and a lot of that falls on the company that's hiring the outsourcing. I was on both sides of it at JP Morgan. I came to JP Morgan during a hiring freeze, so I was brought in through Cushman Wakefield, and my role didn't change till when I was at Cushman Wakefield to when I went to JP Morgan, and I was treated the same by everybody in global real estate, and that came from the top down at JP Morgan. So I think that it's really up to the corporation to push that message down.
Yeah, and just to clarify though, I hate outsourcers, right? I'm no offense to anyone's outsourcers. Outsourcers are intended to rip you off in three different ways. One is that they basically, are incentivized to charge the customer as much as possible and pay the person as little as possible, and taking that margin. Two is that they're like, they say that they're like, they've got all the best people on their team and what have you, but the best people are actually shared amongst other people, and there's no accountability, right? So all three of those, I actually hate outsourcers. I actually am a bigger fan of like freelancer marketplaces and things like that you actually have a direct relationship with the individual, as opposed to going and bouncing through some type of outsourcer and what have you. And that's a very different model than the freelancer world, which I absolutely love.
We have time for one more question.
I wanted to follow up on one of the points you made about people in Austin not staying in the office till 8 p.m. because I recently moved from New York and spent the first 10 years on Wall Street, so that happened a lot. And I was wondering how you felt overall because I don't think it's that people in Austin aren't in the office till 8 p.m. I think it's about more of a perception that people don't take it as seriously overall, that it's just not as professional in this city. Have you seen that changing at all? Is Austin growing up at all? Because I think it's more about that perception than it is whether you're there till 6 or 8. And for people who have been here, are we evolving? Are we growing up a little bit? Or are we sort of stuck in being like, no, we're going to, share keg taps and at 6 o'clock, no matter, it's my party and I'll cry if I want to type thing,
So I'm happy to start again. It's funny, like this same argument actually occurred back in the mid 90s on the New York Wall Street types, where like these freaking jokers in California, they're not wearing freaking shoes. Like they're like just surfing all day, even though Northern California, if you guys know, not a great spot to surf. And like literally like the entire Silicon Valley area, they were like, oh, these jokers, like they're not working hard and what have you. And you think of the amount of innovation on a global scale that's actually occurred out of Silicon Valley. It's unbelievable. So I think it's one of those that every area's got their own culture and how they work. And it's about intelligent people solving tough problems together. And I don't know, I mean, I know a lot of startups here. Like, I actually don't know that anyone is working any less hard than my buddies in the Bay Area and things like that. I do believe the culture is certainly different. And I think that it's actually a more of a collaborative culture in Austin than I've ever seen anywhere else. Right, like you go to the Bay Area, and I lived there for a bunch of years, and like you talk to, and there's so much energy on startups, but like everyone's like super secretive. Don't tell him your idea; he's gonna steal your idea, right? Like, and like nobody collaborated at all. Like it was just this weird, and everyone like said that they were crushing it when they really weren't. When in Austin, I feel like there is a lot more authenticity, right? Where like two competitors will actually sit in the room together and be like, hey, how do we like share costs and go and work this together? Or like, let's talk about the different things that are working and not working and going to make that happen. And that's one of the things that I love about the Austin community. And so I don't believe that actually people work less hard here. I actually believe that people are crushing it here. And it's only a matter of time until more and more of the investment dollars are here. And that, I think it's a great spot to be. And just like, Austin real estate is less than in the Bay Area, but that's only a matter of time too. I think the valuations of the companies are going to do the same thing.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think, the commitment on the startups and the companies here in Austin maybe transcends some of that of the Bay. But what's different about Austin that not a lot of people realize is the core business locations are pretty spread out. There is an area of downtown that has a pretty highly concentrated number of businesses. But if you go out to 360, there's also a number of corporations out that way. North Austin, there's a number of companies out that way. So you don't see everybody kind of clocking out at 6 p.m. downtown because there's a number of different people out in different areas of Austin working different hours and different times.
Yeah, and I agree. The one of the things that was said here that the collaborative spirit is much better here. I mean, we're a collaborative office space company, and we took 100,000 feet straight off the bat. Like, we're going all in on Austin and the collaboration and how awesome this city is, and we couldn't be more excited to be here. I think the guys in New York are acting like they're working too hard, but they're not.
Awesome. And on that note, I think we'll wrap it up. I want to thank the panelists again, Frank, Andy, Michelle, Ricardo. Thank all of you for coming out. Thank Team Austin.
Thank you all.
Our sponsors. It's a great event. Thank you guys.